Hello and welcome to the Business of Winning podcast, brought to you by Performance Insights, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide. Just click on www.performanceinsights.co.uk and send us your requirements.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Winning podcast with me, Mark Gallagher. Well, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by none other than Jonathan Legard. Now, Jonathan will be known to many fans, particularly in the UK, because he was the voice of Formula One for BBC Radio 5 Live for many years, then became lead commentator on BBC Television's Formula One coverage back when it was on the BBC before Sky Sports F1 took over the television broadcasting rights in the UK. He is still working across a variety of sports, including the Olympic Games this year. We see him sometimes at Formula One hosting events, keeps in close contact with the sport. And I thought it would be an absolutely ideal opportunity to talk to him about Formula One in 2024, some of the big stories, and also to look ahead to what 2025 might bring for all of us as passionate fans of Formula One. So I hope you enjoy this chat between two long-standing friends and associates, and giving you our insights and thoughts on the big stories of Formula One. Well, Jonathan, it's such a pleasure to have you join me on the Business of Winning podcast to talk all things Formula One. How are you? How's your 2024 been?
Not as good as Max Verstappen's, but still, Lando Norris-like. I'll take it like that. No, it's been good, very good year. I mean, I've been lucky enough to be at Silverstone to watch a masterclass by Lewis Hamilton in that Grand Prix, work with Gunther Steiner, work with a young driver called Liam Lawson. You may have heard of him.
Liam Lawson. Very topical.
Exactly. I think we're going to be talking about him.
Yeah.
Juan Pablo Montoya popped through. Also been to Paris to work at the Olympics and work with various rugby players. In fact, talking about Liam Lawson and New Zealanders, I had the pleasure of also working with Dan Carter at Twickenham for when England played New Zealand in one of the autumn internationals. You always know, and you'll know this from all the speaking you do, when someone special walks into the room and starts to talk.
Yeah.
As the room goes silent.
People say that about you, Jonathan, when you walk.
If only. Some people say, he's quite intense. He said, well, that's why he was one of the best, because we know, having worked with various sports people, and particularly in Formula One, you don't get to the top without being incredibly, not necessarily intense, but so dedicated, so committed, incredibly focused. And that's exactly what he was. But he was really, really interesting. And he would be a great guest at a Formula One team, I'm sure, about, what made him tick, Liam Lawson. Go and have a word with Dan Carter.
Well, talking about people who bring great focus to what they do, let's talk about Max Verstappen. His fourth title was an incredible year, not an easy year for the Dutch driver.
No, but certainly after 2023, what were you expecting? I was, in a way, I've got to say, I was sort of dreading 2024 in the sense that however much I love Formula One and still want to watch and listen and read and consume all about it, I was thinking, cool, if we have another 2023, and I'm not saying I'm not a Max Verstappen fan, but as a lover of sport, you want to see competition. And basically 2023 was no competition, was it? Because Red Bull and Max Verstappen dominated everything, rewriting record books. 19 wins in 22 races, and Red Bull win 21 of 22 races. I mean, phenomenal. So I was thinking, if this is going to be repeated, I'm not going to be watching. My sons are both big Formula One fans. One is more Lewis Hamilton than George Russell, but neither of them really go for Max, but one in particular doesn't. So it's like, well, I'm never going to watch this. It's like, all right, okay. So to see how the season started as well with Red Bull, Verstappen, Red Bull, Verstappen, Red Bull, Verstappen, and you got Sergio Perez, scoring podiums. You're thinking, well, here we go. I mean, this is it. And then suddenly everything changes. But of course, what really galvanized the season, I think, also, and counterbalanced this fear that Red Bull were going to dominate everything, was the fact that, is this going to be a big Red Bull implosion with all the internal investigation surrounding Christian Horner at the start of the year? And that gave it a completely different dimension. And it was a long-running story throughout the season, and is still surely going to play into 2025. How are they going to cope now without Adrian Newey?
Yeah, it's just incredible to see how the soap opera of Formula One writes such a dramatic script as it has managed to do this year. You're right, lots of tensions and politics within Red Bull. You mentioned the internal investigation. You mentioned, Adrian Newey, we're going to talk about a little bit later, leaving the team. There was a rather public fallout between Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner, which got a lot of airtime. And in the middle of it all, you have Max Verstappen losing the winning way. Actually, I took my little team at Performance Insights. We all went to the Barcelona Grand Prix and saw Max win that race. And at that time, we thought, well, he's just going to keep on winning, isn't he? Turned out that was his last victory for 4 months. It was incredible what then happened over the course of the summertime, the resurgence of McLaren and indeed Ferrari, and suddenly Red Bull slipping from first in the World Championship from constructors all the way back to third. It was an incredible turnaround.
But it was also notable, I think, what you just said then, just going through the chronology of it all, how he maybe developed as a person more than people imagined or gave him credit for. Because you talk to people within Red Bull, they say, just a kid who just wants to race.
Yeah.
And you go, he's a bit chippy, he's a bit edgy. You say, that's the view is, publicly, yes, he is, but take him away from the spotlight in the garage, not a problem. And, he's really good fun to work with, just wants to get out there and do it. So for him to have to go through all the stuff which you've hinted at, with his dad getting into a big public spat. Because at one stage you thought, is this team just going to completely explode? Which is exactly the word that Jos Verstappen used. As long as Christian Horner's here, it's like, wow. So for him to navigate that and somehow pull it all together with a teammate who just lost confidence horribly, and we'll come on to Sergio Perez, and still come through and perform. That race in the wet, and that magnificent performance in the Brazilian Grand Prix, starting 17th and coming through to dominate and win, was just one of the great drives, not just of 2024 or of the 21st century in Formula One, but of any time in Formula One. It's like Lewis Hamilton winning Silverstone 2008 or even Silverstone 2024, Monaco as well for Lewis Hamilton. There are just some drivers who set themselves apart. And I hope people see him in a different way now and give him the respect. 4 out of 4 is phenomenal after given such a bumpy run. Yes, you can win when everything's going your way in 2023, but when you've got so many bumps in the road and the other cars, particularly McLaren, were better, he still came through and he still won.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something you talked about. I think Max is to some extent misunderstood. David Coulthard, who I do a lot of work with, David flies to races now and again with Max in the plane, and they get on well. And David said to me not so long ago, he said Max is really misunderstood. He just loves motor racing, and he eats, lives and breathes racing cars and the craft of racing, and he just loves it. He'd drive anything, and he when he's not physically racing, he's virtually racing, online and all the rest of it. And I think, much as he sometimes oversteps the mark, and I think, I don't think Max would mind anyone saying that he pushes the limit. He knows he does, but as he's unashamed about it.
Drivers do, don't they? From Senna and Schumacher, they all do it. He reminded me very much of Michael Schumacher. The number of times you'd be hearing, been Michael Schumacher, he's done this, he's done that, out of order, where are the stewards, what are the FIA going to do? But he didn't do a Damon Hill 1994 at Adelaide like Schumacher did. He didn't do a Jacques Villeneuve Jerez 1997. Yes, okay, he shepherded various drivers off the track and so on. There was incidents various with Norris, but nothing where it was directly bang, I'm taking you out.
Yeah, and he wasn't afraid to speak his mind. I think he did a number of things which really impressed me in terms of he stepped up to leadership of the team. And I don't just mean as a driver. I think as a person, he knew the team was going through trials and tribulations. There was a lot of noise around the team, a lot of speculation. He kept his head down. He kept delivering. He drove consistently during those months when the car wasn't a winner. He was finishing second or third or fourth or doing whatever he had to do to keep his points advantage. And again, that just showed him the maturity of the guy. He knows how to win world championship titles, and he did it masterfully. And I thought that victory in Sao Paulo was just so brilliant because after months of uncertainty, he just slammed the critics with the most awe-inspiring performance. on a great track in difficult conditions and left everyone saying, wow, what a great and worthy champion. Let's move on to talk about Checo Perez, because you and I are recording this not long after it's been announced that Checo's leaving Red Bull Racing, being replaced by Liam Lawson. It's been a slightly sorry and sad tale in the end, hasn't it, for Checo Perez? Because I think he's a very likable guy. People in Formula One, we've known him for a long time, seen him come through the ranks and into Sauber and into McLaren and then Force India, and then achieve his ambition of getting into a race-winning car at Red Bull. But ultimately, it's a career that petered out.
Because he was up against one of the greats in the sport, wasn't he? And I do wonder, the flip side of Max being such a dominant force for Red Bull and being such a star for Red Bull, winning them championships, winning races, just leading the team, as you said, is that if you have such dominance and don't necessarily, well, you can mess with your teammates' head and the confidence and the car. For example, you go back to Azerbaijan when in 2023, when Sergio Perez comes through, he's won 2 of the first 4 races, likes the car. I'm in this for the championship. You're thinking, Sergio, are you really? I mean, as a neutral, you go, great, fantastic. We want inter-team rivalry. We want inter-driver rivalry within a team. But that was probably the worst thing he could have said, because he never won another race thereafter. Max got the car much more suited to what he wanted it, the more pointy style, and bang, off we went. And he never got going again. And it not only Max then sort of thought, well, established himself in charge of the team and went on to dominate that season, but it weakened the team because Sergio never seemed to regain his mojo and it just lost his way. And when, we all know in life, whatever you do, your podcast, The Business of Winning, if you're not confident, you're not going to win. And he never looked like winning in 2024, sadly. And he sort of just... And I wonder whether they gave him that contract in the summer to go, come on, we believe in you, Sergio. You can do it. Max likes you. We like you. You helped us win the championships in the past. You've been a race winner in the past. You've been on pole in the past. But actually, he was gone.
Yeah, giving him that new contract was a brave move by Christian Horner to show total confidence in the guy. But exactly as you say, I think Sergio had lost confidence in himself. He'd lost confidence in the car. He was making mistakes. We all know that when drivers start races further back in the grid, they inevitably get caught up in turmoil. I've got to share a statistic which just slightly blew me away the other day when I saw it online, and I have to apologize whoever work this out and have the presence of mind to go back and work it out. So Max Verstappen scored 437 championship points this season. So too did Sergio Perez, if you add his points from the last 2 seasons together. Exactly the same number of points over 2 years. And when you look at that tally and you look at Max with his 437 points, and then you see Sergio on 152, I mean, it's not quite a third of the number of points, but it's getting on towards that, and it doesn't make for good reading. So it's a real shame the way it's ended for him, and I feel sorry for him. I also feel sorry for those fabulous fans in Mexico who just back him so much and really wanted to see a Mexican world champion. But it's a brutal business, professional sports, not for the faint-hearted.
As a team principal yourself, you've done that. Is that the right way to run a team? Because you think of, I know you get fireworks, Senna Prost, Hamilton, Rosberg. Maybe we're going to see it and we'll come on to it. Piastri against Norris for McLaren in 2025. But if you have such a dominant teammate, is that good for the team? Because everyone always says so often it's about the team sport, where it's about us winning the Constructors' Championship. Well, if you've got someone who's so far behind and his mindset has been so affected by what is clearly very much Max Verstappen's team, how can you hope to realise the dream of everyone in the team of doing well? Because one side of the garage is absolutely on the ceiling, the other one is through the floor.
Yeah, but you and I think we could do a series of podcasts on the trials and tribulations of the number 2 driver and about team orders and about that pecking order. I remember, my former lodger, Eddie Irvine, he came up against Michael Schumacher at Ferrari, and Eddie, I think it was Eddie who told me he spoke to Gerhard Berger and said to Gerhard, how did you deal with being up against Ayrton? And Gerhard said, well, just make sure you get paid in cash and keep it in a wardrobe, so when you get home every evening, you can remind yourself why you're doing this. And this is the really interesting thing, because so many teams refuse to really grasp the nettle around the fact that you have to have a clear number one, number two approach. And I mean, we saw it a little bit at McLaren. Was it papaya orders or whatever it was that I talked about this year? I mean, let's not beat around the bush. There has to be one driver who, relatively early on in the season, it becomes clear who's going to challenge for the championship or challenge for whatever position in the drivers' championship they're going to go for. And you have to have that pecking order. And as we know only too well from Mercedes-Benz, they went through a horrendous time when Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton effectively became almost enemies within the team, and the disharmony that brings into it. And I feel with Checo Perez, you mentioned that his statement about, going for the championship after that win in Baku. I remember watching it and thinking, well, for goodness sake, Sergio, you're not going for the championship. It's never going to happen. Max is number one in the team. Everyone knows that. It's probably written in Max's contract, even though you don't know that. Who are you fooling? But the trouble is that whether it's a Daniel Ricciardo or a Sergio Perez, or, we could list any number of drivers, they kind of refuse to get to the point of accepting that the number two slot's where it's at. And it is a shame. I understand why they've got to keep on trumpeting the fact that they're going for the championship, but sooner or later it's not going to happen. And Valtteri Bottas has made some really fabulous interviews since he ended his partnership with Lewis Hamilton, talking about the difficulty of being up against someone who is just so good. And I suspect it's a story that's going to continue to run and run in Formula One. Let's move on and talk about McLaren.
Well, I was just going to say before we do it, what about Liam Lawson then? How exciting is that to be then? If he's going to come in and alongside Max Verstappen, it's going to be the bite a bit, because remember, Max comes in and straight away, boom, he just takes on all comers. Come on, and we've all seen Liam Lawson is not backward in coming forward. No. He's quite spiky. He's a strong driver. There wasn't much in it. He's already been built up a lot by Helmut Marko, who, as we know, loves someone who's going to be strong, not just on the track but in the head as well. So this could be fascinating to see. I mean, he's ruffled a few feathers already, hasn't he?
He has ruffled a few feathers, notably Fernando Alonso's. I think Liam. So first of all, he's 22 years of age, but he's that makes him a relatively old driver in terms of coming into Formula One, as we will talk about in a few minutes. And he's a wise individual. He's a very humble kind of guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him. He was here in Adelaide at the Motorsport Festival just before Melbourne earlier this year. And he has a great group of supporters behind him. One thing that I really should mention is that, he's got a group of individuals who've supported him from New Zealand, from home in New Zealand. He doesn't come from like some super wealthy family. He's had a group of individuals who have come together to provide him with the funding to pursue his career and to reach Formula One, which is, it's an incredible dream for him and for the people behind him. I was thinking earlier on today, actually, about one of the great stars of New Zealand motorsport, Colin Giltrap. He funded the A1 Team New Zealand team whenever I was competing in A1 with Team Ireland. Colin was just the most stunning, supporter of motorsport in New Zealand. Sadly passed away last April, and I was thinking today he would have been the most delighted to see New Zealand having another Formula One driver in a competitive car, as Liam will be. So thoughts to the Giltrap family, and it's just great for New Zealand motorsport to see Liam up there. But it is going to be interesting if he's half as sensible as I think he is. He's going to know that his job is to support Max, to get in there, to learn, to keep the points going. If Max is on pole, he'll be third, or if Max is second, he'll be fourth. And, that's not to say he's going to intentionally be backing off, but he'll know what his role is in the team. And I'm sure Helmut Marko will be saying to Liam, look, drive the wheels off the car, get the most you can out of the performance. Don't worry about Max. And because the reality is that, Max will quite obviously continue to be team leader for the foreseeable. But I think what Christian Horner and the team have had to come to grips with is that they need to have both hands in the fight. They can't have one hand tied behind their back, which was very much the way it was this past year with, unfortunately, Checo Perez's performance. And especially when you're up against one of the only two teams not to change the driver lineup next year, which is McLaren with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. And that segues us beautifully into McLaren. What an astonishing performance from Zak Brown and Andrea Stella's team, winning the Constructors' Championship this year for the first time in, my goodness, 26 years.
No, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I think I'm going to mention, I'd like to highlight the second name you mentioned, there, Andrea Stella. What a stellar job he's done. You know, the race engineer that used to be with, pun intended, with Fernando Alonso, and you never know whether someone who's been a race engineer, where they're going to go, because often it's their management or their engineering or their technical director or whatever it might be. But he has moved very hugely successfully into making such a strong team. I'm very happy he's got quite a showman in Zak Brown, you know, front of house. You do all the talking, Zak. That's your style, you know. But that's what a double act they are. One who can take the world on in terms of the media and marketing and sell the team and be the front of be out meeting the world. We'll just keep everything going because that's what you need. And he's done a fantastic job. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how, having made such great strides in 2024, and you know done that, some might say, and we could come on to this, that Lando Norris should have made a greater fist of his championship challenge when Red Bull and Verstappen were struggling so much from the summer onwards. But undoubtedly, having achieved what they've just done and picking up on what you've just said, we're only two lineups for 2025. They are surely going to start as favourites for the Constructors' Championship. But why not Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri being, you know, well up there, big favourites, or among the contenders, most definitely, to be the drivers' champion. Now, Max Verstappen will have other ideas, but let's see how the technical team at Red Bull find themselves. But for McLaren to come through, and it's been waiting so long, hasn't it? You know, you think back to how long ago we saw Fernando Alonso having a go at all the issues. You know, I'm going to read a book now.
GP2 engines.
Correct. I mean, the lot. And here they are now. You know, they've done it and it's fantastic. So, and it's so good for Formula One. Again, as you said, it's this extraordinary drama that is Formula One. When on the one hand, you're looking for a team to establish, to be the best in the world. And that's the drive of every team principal, every driver, every engineer, every commercial director. This is what we want to do. And if the other 9 teams say, well, this is so boring, we're doing a better job. And that's what McLaren have done. It's fantastic. But now, as we know, you can win one championship. But if you're truly great or very good, you go and do it again and again and again.
Interesting, something you just said a few moments ago about Zak and Andrea Stella, which makes me just think about the organization, the structure of these teams. Quite a few Formula One teams these days have multiple bosses. You know, they'll create some quite complex structure in terms of who all the bosses are, and you have a team principal and you'll have a chief executive and you'll have this and that and the other thing, group this and group that. McLaren is kind of slightly old style. You know, I think of Zak and Andrea Stella. I mean, not that dissimilar to, you know, a Ron Dennis and John Barnard or you know, Patrick Head and a Frank Williams. So although Andrea Stella is team principal, he's kind of technical team principal, whereas Zak is kind of commercial team principal. Now, I love the simplicity of that. And actually, again, it's quite similar to the way Christian Horner and Adrian Newey have been. You know, the Christian doing the front-facing media sponsorship, etc., and Adrian doing the technical job. So there's a simplicity to the structure of McLaren, which I think must have really helped them with what they've done. Do you think, Jonathan, that McLaren almost caught themselves by surprise this year with just how competitive they were? Because they seemed a little bit confused about their own team orders and who should be given preference. And that hesitation that they had a few times in races, sort of operational sort of hesitation that they had, kind of handed opportunity to their rivals.
I think you're right. I think it's a nice way of putting it, actually. They surprised themselves because I think almost the rest of us were surprised as much by Red Bull's tumbling as the climb back by McLaren. They weren't expecting it, but then they managed to make the most of it. They did a great job, but I still think Lando Norris could have done better. And that's one of my thoughts for 2025. Has Lando Norris learned enough to go again and be as prominent again and learn from the mistakes in 2025? Because he could have pushed Max Verstappen so much more. The number of times he got to the great qualifying and then just messed it up again and again. Yeah. Okay, it's the racecraft which comes, and we all know that it's like everything in life. The more you do it, the better you get. Some it comes more naturally. Schumacher or Hamilton or Verstappen. So maybe maybe Lando rather, is going to learn a bit like Jenson Button did to become a champion. But that the truly great maybe just get it straight away, and he's got to show something, because I wonder whether he's going to find Oscar Piastri far more difficult and far more challenging in 2025. If he was just getting to grips with the car, and was maybe, as you said, just to pick up your point about being surprised, he ain't going to be surprised now. He will go into 2025. He's a 2-time race winner, and he is ready to go all out for that championship. And Lando, if you're in my way, I'm coming round, coming through, coming over, whatever. I'm on my way. For Andrea Stella and Zach Brown to manage that. They'll say, lovely problem. Let's see if it comes to blows.
Can you imagine just how determined Oscar Piastri is to win the opening race of the season in Melbourne, home race, with Mark Webber whispering in his ear? I mean, if anyone's going to coach you on how not to be the number 2 driver, it's got to be Mark Webber. He literally has learned, from big teammate to the greats.
Talking about Australia, you know what it's like with Mark Webber. He never had a good result there.
No, he didn't.
Awful home. Come on then, Mark, this year. You go, yeah. And it's
home curse.
Oh, some races just don't happen. Jim Clark never won in Monaco. Why was that?
Yeah.
Graham Hill, I don't think, won in a British
5 times.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
How weird that is. So therefore, but if he wins, what a story that would be. Yeah. What a launch pad.
Let's talk about Ferrari and Mercedes. So Ferrari, second in the Constructors' Championship, they actually put McLaren under pressure in those final few races of the season. You'd have to say Fred Vasseur has done a good job there. He seems to be making the team more confident in itself, and they're taking a few more risks. The car is developing quite well. They still have the odd race where they disappoint us and they disappoint themselves, but Ferrari in 2024 made a step forward, didn't they?
They did, and it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic between Leclerc and Carlos Sainz was really good. That is obviously going to change because it's Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, coming into that in a minute. But Carlos Sainz, how's he going to manage that rise and second place with Ferrari, with a move to Williams, who's still got a heck of a lot to do? That's a real show of faith by him in a team which can sound like they know where they're going, with James Vowles, who's made a good impression so far. But it's all very well talking a good game. You've got to perform.
Yeah, you got to deliver.
Still a lot of work to be done there to make them even regular point scorers, never mind podium and winning a race. What is it, 2026, 2028? I think the way we're talking about, that's a long way off. So and a driver's career which can end very, very quickly. We've seen that with Daniel Ricciardo. You're flying high, you're doing this, you're going here, you're going there, but actually if you're not winning, you're not performing. It's a struggle. But in terms of Ferrari themselves, it's good. It's good for Formula One. It's such a brand name for Formula One, Ferrari, and he's done a really impressive job, Fred Vasseur. And now he has got one of someone who's known for a long, long time. 20 years ago, the experience GP2 with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Let's see how he manages that, and of course the anticipation now for 2025 with Lewis Hamilton there. And that was one of the great stories at the start of 2024, even before we got the internal investigations and so on at Red Bull. It's like, what? Hamilton's leaving Mercedes? What a challenge. So that's really exciting to see him go there. Yeah. And whether that's going to be a renaissance for him, because not that he disappeared completely in 2024, but it wasn't necessarily the dominant Lewis Hamilton we've come to expect, apart from, as you said, Spa and that wonderful drive at Silverstone. Ferrari doing well is great business for Formula One. And with Hamilton, wow.
Yeah, so let's actually dive into the Hamilton thing. We were going to talk about that a little bit later, but I think, it was such a shocking story when the news broke. Lewis Hamilton leaving Mercedes-Benz. We were all pretty sure that he'd be going to bed wearing Mercedes-Benz pajamas for the rest of his life. He'd be firmly part of the brand forever, and he's left. And it clearly took everyone by surprise, not least which was the Mercedes team itself, the fact that Lewis was off. And it's been interesting to see how Mercedes have handled it. I think some of the communications around it have been, a little bit inconsistent, but at the end of the day, they're clearly very disappointed that Lewis is leaving. I certainly don't subscribe to those who say that Lewis Hamilton has lost his mojo. He definitely has had some difficult weekends. He's admitted that. He's had some weekends where he's even said, I'm no longer fast enough, but he's not making that as an overall statement. He's talking about specific weekends or specific issues that he's faced. There have been enough, not just flashes of brilliance, but enough really very, very strong drives this year to suggest that Lewis Hamilton in a racing car is still world class. And there's got to be a fresh bounce in his step when he slips into those red Ferrari overalls. And the two biggest brand names in Formula One in terms of team and driver, Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari, coming together. I mean, Melbourne is going to be just amazing to watch, the reaction of the world's media that will descend upon there to see Hamilton and Ferrari joining together. And it's exciting. I mean, whatever happens, it's really going to be a thrilling story to watch through the course of the next couple of seasons.
And mentioning Melbourne in the first race, do you think he'll do what he did when he first went to Mercedes and stop in his first pit stop in the wrong garage? he'll be going along in a Ferrari and stop in Mercedes. They go, what are you doing here?
It's going to be so fascinating to see that interplay between him and Charles. I love the fact that in Formula One at the moment, there's so many efforts made for everyone to be mates with each other, and they do all these PR things and TikTok videos, and they're on Instagram, and they're all out having dinner together, and they're all matey. But you and I know the moment the helmet goes on and the visor goes down, it's a whole new ball game, and they know their teammate is the one they absolutely have to beat. Lewis Hamilton is not going to Ferrari expecting to be number 2 to Charles Leclerc, and Charles Leclerc is certainly not planning to allow a 40-year-old to come into his team and take over from him. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, isn't it, for Fred Vasseur to manage those two personalities and talents.
I think also the challenge is for Lewis Hamilton, because he will be aware of voices like Eddie Jordan, for example, saying if there's any scintilla of doubt in his mind, if I was the team principal, as he was saying, that he wasn't believing that he was as fast as anyone. In fact, he was quicker than anyone. He's a 7-time world champion, etc., with all the records he's broken. And if he has any doubt that he's not that Lewis Hamilton, then I don't want him. So he will be aware of that. And it may just be, as you said, it's the new driver bounce. It's going to Ferrari, one of the great names. Here we have it. The world is going to be looking at Lewis, and he likes to prove people wrong. He likes to thrive on that attention to show what he is about, what he can do. And he is such an iconic figure now in Formula One, not just in the car, but out of it as well, for what he's done for inclusion, diversity, and all sorts of causes like that. In the end, he will know, as we all do, that it comes down to what he does in a racing car, which is now red. And there will be those in the garage who'll be thinking, okay, Lewis, great to have you. Fantastic. What a great name. It's going to take us forward. It's going to take the team forward. There'll be others going, I wonder if he's still got it. I wonder if he can still do it. Maybe talking to people at Mercedes, hey, what do you reckon? Well, I'm not sure. And the whispers will be there, but let's see how quickly he can silence them. Because, okay, we just talked about if Piastri wins his home Grand Prix, what happens if Lewis Hamilton nails the first race in Melbourne for Ferrari?
You would not put it past him, would you? You wouldn't put it.
Absolutely not. That's what great champions do. They turn things around. I mean, and it's another sort of regret in a way is that we haven't got a former Ferrari world champion still with us, someone who Lewis was a very strong bond with, as in Niki Lauda. Yeah, how interesting that would be as well. That would be fascinating. Gone to Ferrari is another matter too, but knowing Niki might have been quite, just go, see what it's like. It's mad, but you'll love it.
So here's a question for you, because lots of people are saying, like, can Lewis win another championship title at Ferrari? Can he win his 8th title at Ferrari? My personal view is that in the same way that Damon Hill got a little bit fed up with people saying you only won a world championship because you were in a Williams, Damon just wanted to win a Grand Prix in another car, and of course he took that famous victory for my old team at Jordan in Spa '98. And I think that win for Damon was really important to him. Do you not agree that Lewis doesn't need to win another title, but my goodness, if he just wins some races at Ferrari, that's going to be more than enough to well, I was going to say cement his legend. I mean, he's already a legend, but it'll be further embellished by just a few Grand Prix victories for Ferrari.
But he's going there to do more than just a few Grand Prix, isn't he? I mean, I would have thought so. I can't believe, knowing how competitive he is and knowing what happened at the end of 2021 hurt You only had to look at the tears. I mean, the emotion he showed at Silverstone, that first win since that horror day in his mind and Mercedes' minds and many Lewis Hamilton fans' minds. I mean, that's the emotion which drives him. So therefore, he's not just going there to make up the numbers and be the bag carrier for Charles Leclerc. He's out there to win. And I think it would be wonderful. He could do that. There's an element of doubt. At least he's been doing it more, say, than Michael Schumacher, who then came back with unfinished business, but actually never lost it. Lewis has been there right in the heart of things, pushing for wins, pushing for poles, whatever it might be, wrestling with a troublesome, difficult Mercedes, but never, you hope, losing that sort of desire and hunger. And I would love to think that, as you say, the spark the flame is burning even brighter now, which is nothing against Mercedes, but here's a challenge. Right, Lewis, can you still do it? Age 40, can you help Ferrari win a world championship and become world champion, your 8th title? Go for it.
Now, in the time we have left, we're not going to get through all the things which we hope to talk about because it's fast moving. But just in a sentence, do you think George Russell can rise to being team leader and taking the fight to the rivals for Mercedes-Benz? It's a massive year ahead for him with Kimi Antonelli coming in against him.
I think he can, most definitely. He's 26 years old. He's not sort of 21 or 22 or something. He's been with Lewis Hamilton. As he said, he's learned from the best. And whatever your view on the spat between him and Max Verstappen, that showed him, I'm ready for you, Max. I'm ready for anything. He feels that confidence. He has outperformed Lewis Hamilton many times in the last few years, and therefore you take massive confidence and optimism from that. So I have no problem with that. I think the other side of the garage could be interesting. What happens if the 18-year-old Antonelli is not everything that he's cracked up to be, that he's not Max Verstappen or a Lewis Hamilton coming in and smashing it? On the other side, what happens if he is? That's going to be the challenge for George Russell, how he handles that. He's, previously he was the hunter chasing Lewis Hamilton. Now he'll be the hunted. But I think I'll be quite happy there. And I have every confidence he'll do that. And I hope he goes on to prove that. And I hope that there's a healthy rivalry which works out between Russell and Antonelli. But he needs to be on his guard. Don't take it for granted that just because you've seen off, in inverted commas, Lewis Hamilton, that you've got an 18-year-old in your pocket. That never happened. Formula One doesn't always work like that. So therefore, that's a long sentence. But yes, I think he can do it, frankly. The key, of course, is has he got the car to do it?
Yeah, it's been a pretty horrific time for Mercedes-Benz. They've, on the one hand, they've made so much progress since the new regulations started. And of course, they made a huge wrong turn with the car in 2022. They have come back. They've turned themselves back into race winners. You mentioned Kimi Antonelli in terms of, what can he do against George? One of the things about Kimi is that if he was to go the other way, if he was to make a lot of mistakes, a lot of rookie mistakes as an 18-year-old, it looks like Valtteri Bottas will be the team's reserve driver, and that could be a very solid safety net for Toto Wolff if things went pear-shaped for Kimi Antonelli. But we hope that's not the case for Kimi, even if Valtteri would be desperate to get back into a Mercedes after a torrid time over at Sauber for 3 years. Let's move on to another question. Jonathan Legard, did you ever think we would see Flavio Briatore back in Formula One as team principal? No, you remember the way in which he exited the sport, the ignominy of what happened in Singapore 2008 and the aftermath of that. And at one point he was actually banned from the sport for life, but he's now back as he's not team principal, but he's only not team principal by choice. He is essentially running that team for Luca De Meo at Renault.
4 words, only in Formula One. How many other sports would do that? It is an extraordinary return. But it's...
What's the footballing equivalent? Go on, give us what would be the footballing equivalent of Flavio returning to Formula One as team principal, as team boss?
New chairman of the FA. How about that? It is extraordinary. It leaves a taste in the mouth in a way, and that because what was going on in Singapore in 2008 was just bonkers. But then others have come back, Simmons was maybe told what to do and so on. But it does seem, do you learn your lesson? I don't know. But he certainly brings colour. He certainly brings dynamism. And if you ask Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso, who had him as his manager for a long time, he knows what he's doing. And
Yeah.
he knows the law of the jungle, as you might say, in Formula One. And therefore, he's a celebrity and he wants to be back in there.
Yeah. Let's talk about Adrian Newey. That was the other big. I mean, the Lewis Hamilton Ferrari story was one thing. We never would have imagined that Adrian Newey would ever leave Milton Keynes. And I mean, frankly, go to any other team, but he's chosen to leave. And of course, my former boss and someone you know well too, Mr. Jordan, managed all of that process, apparently, or at least was in the middle of it all. But it was an extraordinary story when that unfolded, wasn't it?
It was, and it was on the one hand, as a general talking point, I think it was great that Adrian Newey received so much more coverage and understanding and appreciation and profile, just to explain how good this man is. And yes, there are the brilliant drivers and the people who make the team work, but also his way of working and his skill, his expertise, his brilliance, his genius got recognized. And what he's done so often is just remarkable. And I got to just quote an interview that he gave to Jake Humphrey. And I still find this extraordinary, that when he went to Red Bull for the first time, and I hope anyone at Aston Martin is not listening to this, obviously, but doesn't fall into the same trap. So when Adrian Newey is hired to go, do you know the story? He went to Red Bull. And he thought, well, we'll go out, take the technical team out for lunch and so on. We'll talk it through and, get to know each other and so on. So they go out and they're having a good time. And then someone within the Red Bull team said, just Adrian, it's fantastic to have you on board. We're really looking forward to working with you. But I just want to tell you, we've got a fantastic way of working here. Just our methodology is really good and we don't want to change it. And so I hope we can all make that work. And he's thinking, okay. And apparently there was not one question about, Adrian, you've been very successful at Williams. You've been very successful at McLaren. What have you done to be so, to achieve that success? Nothing.
Yeah.
And on it going. And you think, how can you not tap into, it's not like he doesn't come in with an ego the size of a continent. He just gets on with his work and does it and is brilliantly successful. So how can we all work together to achieve the goal, which is why he's there and why they're in Formula. Everyone's in Formula One. I just hope that they all gel together. And if he is able to take that team higher, because just looking at their results recently, you will have done, we all have a look there, this year, 94 points in 5th place, miles behind the top 4, nowhere near a podium. That's a heck of a gap to make up.
But again, that happened this year. And what occurs is that they showed the door to Dan Fallows, who had joined him from Red Bull and only a year earlier was being feted as the reason why they were scoring so many podium finishes. And one thing that I think we can all agree upon is that when teams fall into the trap of developing a blame culture where they want to blame someone when things go wrong, you go into reverse. And I mean, they have a lot of senior people there now. It strikes me again, going back to something I said about McLaren, that Aston Martin looks like it has quite a complicated structure. I hope Adrian is able to simplify that. The story that you just shared, by the way, about him having someone, it was actually a former Jaguar engineer telling Adrian Newey, this is not the way we do things here. I mean, my goodness. So in his excellent book, How to Build a Car, which he wrote 5 or 6 years ago, there's a chapter devoted to that experience of joining what was a Jaguar team and building Red Bull Racing. And it's a really interesting chapter because although Adrian is known for his technical expertise, that chapter was all about the people factor. It was about changing the culture. It was about getting people pointed in a different direction, working together, the alignment that they had. Indeed, he talks about sacking 3 people. Those 3 people had a bunch of kind of lieutenants. There were 40 or 50 people reporting to those 3 people. And he said it was only after making those dramatic, brutal changes that suddenly the lights switched on and everyone realized there's a new way. It's Adrian's way, or it's Adrian's road or the high road. So he is a leader, and he knows that the job of Formula One is difficult enough without people getting in your way and coming up with the kind of internal tensions that stop teams from progressing. And so it's a fascinating development. And as you said earlier on, one big question is, how will Red Bull Racing fare in the post Adrian Newey era? Couple of things that I thought we should touch on before we finish, because let's look ahead to 2025. And one of the things about the 2025 season is when you look down the entry list and realize that only 10 of the drivers who will go onto the grid in Melbourne are with the same team that they were just a few months ago. We have lost 6 drivers from Formula One. Checo Perez, Daniel Ricciardo, of course, a pretty dramatic exit for him. One that left a lot of fans and a lot of media, I think, asking questions about the way it was handled. Logan Sargent, of course, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas, and Zhu Guan Yu. So actually 6 drivers from Formula One leaving. We've got a bunch of new driver partnerships. Max Verstappen, of course, with Liam Lawson, George Russell with Kimi Antonelli, Charles and Lewis together at Ferrari. Only Aston Martin and McLaren, as we said, are keeping the same lineup. Alpine, we have Pierre Gasly and Jack Doohan. It looks like Tsunoda at the RB team is going to be joined by Isaac Hadjar. Williams, we've obviously got Alex Albon being joined by Carlos Sainz. I have to say I feel very sorry for Carlos Sainz going to Williams after doing such a stunning job for Ferrari. I think he really was one of the stars of this, not just this season, but of recent seasons there. The Haas Formula One team, they will line up with Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman. Sauber, Nico Hulkenberg going there, very much at Audi's behest, and he's joined by Gabriel Bortoleto, the Formula 2 champion. So really all change and lots to look forward to, but it feels kind of unprecedented. Are we seeing kind of a new world order now coming into Formula One with all these 18, 19 and 20-year-olds?
I think so. It's interesting to see where, Max Verstappen, but then we had Sebastian Vettel. I mean, I think it's these drivers that I think all Kimi Räikkönen, Jenson Button, you're always, this is as a former team principal, you're always looking for the next great thing. And it's a question of whether these drivers can perform, whether they can step up. And you only need to look at the Red Bull stable to see, what's happened to Jean-Eric Vergne, for example, what's happened to Jaime Alguersuari, and Sebastian Buemi, for example, to name a few of those who've gone through the Helmut Marko stable. But, he's a tough taskmaster. But then, I know, everyone knows in Formula One, it's really tough in there. And if that is like the hottest kitchen you'll find in motorsport, and if you're good enough, then you'll become a top chef, to extend the analogy. And if you're not, then you'll be in the rubbish bin. And it's going to be a big challenge for the likes of Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar, as you say, French Algerian. That's going to be interesting to see how he comes through. Tsunoda's going to be a bit raw, for example, not maybe getting the
yeah, he must be pretty.
And as we know, that could be one long bleep on F1 in pit to car radio, which would be fascinating. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how drivers settle down, how quickly they can do it. And that's a mark of a strong mind. And that so often is the case. Yes, you can drive very fast in junior formulae, but this is where Formula One sorts out those who've got longevity, who've got talent, and have got that mental toughness to handle themselves when the going gets tough, to work with a team, also to come across get out of the way of Max Verstappen, or if you are going to go wheel to wheel with him, don't be put off by him, and so on. So we're waiting to see whether there is a new world order, because everyone was saying a few years ago, God, it's always Max Verstappen and Red Bull, or previous to that, it's always Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Well, let's see. Have we seen a change? Are we going to see now Max Verstappen in trouble if Red Bull's technical team don't respond as Christian Horner believes they can in the absence of Adrian Newey? Can McLaren kick on and really dominate? Are we set for another sort of Senna Prost time with the likes of Norris and Piastri, or are we going to see Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc completely blitz everyone and go, what a lineup that was? Why did we ever doubt Lewis Hamilton?
Let me change tack a little bit, Jonathan, because you've spent your whole career in sports media, and sometimes I feel stories which seem pretty obvious, they develop it's kind of like a shock horror story. And I kind of feel it's one of those stories going to develop in Formula One over the next 12 months. 2025 will be the last year that Formula One cars will run on petrol. It's the last year of gasoline powered Formula One cars before the new regulations come in 2026. You and I both know that when you're introduced on stage at events, people often describe Formula One as a gas guzzling, high revving, all that kind of stuff, sport. How much do you think the world will pay attention to the fact that Formula One is about to turn its back on fossil fuels, at least for the car racing?
I thought you were going to talk about the FIA suddenly when you said there's a story which is just building. I thought, what are we going to talk about here? Are we going to go?
You want to talk about the president, do you?
Yeah, I thought, are you going to ban me for wearing jewelry, or am I concerned about my
or swearing?
Anyway, I would never do that on your podcast.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I wonder. Well, Formula One so often has an image problem in the sense of, you've just mentioned those two words, gas guzzling. It goes around the world all the time and it talks glibly of being green and so on. Well, actually, what are they doing really? Because they're going here, there and everywhere. 24 races, it's the biggest calendar anywhere. And all they're making changes, Japan's moved from October to it, so it's very near to Australia and China and so on. It's still, an extraordinary expense to move around the world and so on. So I do think there will be recognition, but I do think, as ever, there will be a lot of cynicism around Formula One, because it is Formula One. And look where you're going. You're still doing this. You're still doing that. You're all going around here. And so often, so much of the good, the brilliant technology, the brilliant minds which work in Formula One in terms of all the technical advances that are developed and researched and developed and then put to practice on cars and Formula One racing, is very little cuts through, I feel, unless, let's see how Netflix can help in that way. It's done so much in terms of the profile of the sport and to attract a different audience. So that's not to say that the old school media, as you might say, hasn't done a good job too, but it'll take something for Formula One to lose that image. I still don't think people are convinced, however much Formula E is making advances to electric racing. Ross Brawn always used to talk about hydrogen power. That's where we could make a real difference. So where is that? How far down the road is that, and so on? So I think there'll still be. You maybe think I'm being negative here, but I think there'll be some healthy cynicism still.
And this is why I wanted to ask you, because I think Formula One will be making a lot of noise about the shift away from fossil fuels, and yet, of course, the sport has a great deal of investment from Saudi Aramco, from ExxonMobil, from Shell, from BP, from Petronas, these large, huge fossil fuel companies who sponsor the sport and provide much needed investment. So, your point as a highly experienced broadcaster is extremely important, because I think the world's media will look at it with a degree of skepticism and say it looks like so much greenwash. And that's a thing that Formula One will have to fight very hard to overcome.
I think so. I mean, I don't mean to be negative, but I think there is, it's because they jet around the world so much, it doesn't look good. That's the bottom line. However much excitement it brings and the revenues and so on, and taking America by storm, Vegas, Miami, Austin, so much is developing that's positive for Formula One. Whether that's positive for other forms of motorsport is another debate, but that's not for us now. But Formula One is in a hugely healthy position, and if they're off to Rwanda, then here's another extraordinary development.
So let's finish the podcast on a positive note. We're going to be very early with our predictions, aren't we? I think we've actually already just summed it up in this podcast. So the World Championship next year will be between Oscar Piastri's McLaren and Max Verstappen's Red Bull. Is that correct?
I think I would have them there as the lead two, but that then is my gauntlet going down to Lando Norris. Show me what you can do.
I thought you were going to say gauntlet down to Lewis Hamilton and his Ferrari, but
well, let's see. I'd love that to happen. You've gone down the Hamilton route. There'll be those going, what about Charles Leclerc? Him off. Again, what a story that would be. Another driver coming through. If it's Piastri or Leclerc. We've had Hamilton, you might say. We've had Alonso. We've had Schumacher. Not had Verstappen, because he's in 27 years old. But this is going to be another interesting challenge to him. That's how does he come through? Has the technical team got what it takes to give him the machinery again to go? And if not, then of course the drama is, where's he going to go? Because having said, I've never talked to Mercedes, of course, he then reveals, yes, I did talk to Toto Wolff and Mercedes.
Well, I think you've summed it up very nicely. We have an embarrassment of riches. We have so much talent out there, all going for gold. Jonathan, it's been a pleasure having you on the Business of Winning podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for asking.
Well, I hope, like me, you enjoyed that conversation with Jonathan Legard, and it was such a pleasure to have his time to discuss all things Formula One over the last season and to look ahead to 2025. One thing is very clear. We have much to look forward to. It was such a thrilling, exciting, tumultuous, unexpected, sometimes slightly shocking season in Formula One last year. Plenty of big surprises along the way. And I think we're in for more of the same in 2025. Please do like and subscribe to the podcast. And please do reach out to us on social media and send us any questions. Or indeed, if you have anyone from the business of Formula One that you would like us to track down and interview, who you'd like to get some insights from, we're only too happy to try and make that happen. So have a great new year. We look forward to a fantastic 2025 season for Formula One, the business of winning.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the Business of Winning podcast. And if you want to learn more about performance insights, simply visit our website at performanceinsights.co.uk, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide.